Hi, welcome to Barb's Kitchen Center. My name is Celeste and this is my test kitchen. Today we're going to revisit a video we did before and we're going to do a sourdough starter, except this one will be the purest version of sourdough starter and we'll use nothing but flours and water. So building your own sourdough starter is a bit of a risk. It requires time and patience, and you're basically trying to attract and capture all the wild yeasts that exist in our environment. So you need time and space for them to grow and flourish. Once you have a healthy starter, you can use it like you'd use any other yeast. However, that being said, 2 tablespoons of dry yeast does not equal 2 tablespoons of sourdough starter. If you were to replace your dry yeast with sourdough starter, you'd have to use a half a cup to almost a whole cup of sourdough starter, which would then change the hydration of whatever you're making. And as long as you're aware of that and able to compensate, it will work just fine. The sourdough starter we're making today, it takes about 8 days to make it, and you have to feed it every day. Some things about sourdough starter: if you leave it in a warm environment, like on the counter, it starts to take on some fruity notes. If you have a cooler environment, or you like the more acidy profile, the sour profile, then keep it in a cool place like your fridge. If you mark your jar with an elastic band, you can judge the growth of your starter. If you're like me and you can never find an elastic band, I use a wine writer on a jar, and that shows me how well my starter is doing. If you don't use your starter regularly, you can leave it in the back of your fridge, and that's totally fine. When you take it out of your fridge, you'll notice a dark liquid on top of it. You can either pour that off, and it is an alcohol. It's caused from fermentation. I wouldn't recommend drinking it. I can only imagine that it tastes rather nasty, although I probably have a grandfather who would have indulged. Or you can stir it back into your starter, and that's perfectly fine too. So if you're using it out of the fridge, you're going to need to pull it out about 3 days before you plan on using it. Feed it, leave it on the counter. Love it, stir it every day, and then it'll be good to go. All right. I think that's all I have to say about starter at this point. So let's get busy making our starter right from scratch. Okay, we're going to go super traditional making our sourdough starter today, right to grinding our own flour. I'm not sure what the last thing I milled in here is, so I'm going to clean my mill first. So I need a cup of just white rice. White rice is neutral and won't affect anything. And if I had milled something that might potentially be an allergen, and I really don't want that in the next thing I'm baking, just run a cup of white rice through your mill, and it's considered clean, because you can't actually run soap and water through it. So you have to find something dry that will clean your mill heads. So as always, make sure you can see the yes, or you will get a shower of flour. And here we go. There we go. Now that it's completely powered down, you can pull it out and know for sure you're not going to get a shower of flour. And I will just clean this out and probably use it. I'm going to make fish for supper, so I will dredge my white fish in my rice flour, and it'll make it nice and crispy. So put that aside. Put my mill all back together. As I discovered the other day, you want to be exceptionally careful about making sure you get both these tabs under their lock, or you will not get it to go all the way in. And see, yes. All right, so I have 1 cup of rye berries here to start my sourdough starter off with, and this will be all the rye I use. The rest of the flour I use will be hard red spring wheat over the next couple of days, and then I will use a high gluten bread flour just to feed my starter. All right, in go my wheat berries. Sorry, I said wheat berries, it's actually rye berries. My apologies. So, however, it is all a wheat. So I'm going to use my scale to measure out 110 grams of rye flour. So I did have it zeroed earlier for a different cup, but I'll put this one on. And oh, there we go. My scale is tared. So tearing means resetting your scale to 0. So you set something on it and then you tear it so it comes back to 0, so you know the real weight of whatever it is you happen to be using. So I have a smaller cup here. You can tell the rye flour is darker than you would expect a wheat flour to be, even a red wheat. So, and because it's freshly milled, it's also a little warm, which will help attract wild yeasts once we are ready to, there we go, we're at 100. And yeah, there we go, 111, close enough. I mean, it's a starter, it doesn't have to be exact, you just have to keep true to the ratio. So I will put in my 110 grams of rye flour, scrape it all off my scale, and then I need to measure out 110 grams of preferably filtered water. And the reason you'd want to use filtered water or some sort of bottled water, distilled water, is you don't want the chlorine and other things that you might find in tap water. And if you want to make sure your sourdough starter tastes the same as your friends, if you use filtered water, you won't have the inconsistencies, especially if you live someplace rural and you depend on well water, that can change over time. And I guess I should talk less and watch more. There we go, 94. 107. Okay, a little more, but then I add these together. I stir them up. You want to make sure that the flour is thoroughly dampened, and it's just going to be a pasty, mucky mess for now. So for the next 24 hours, this will be my starter. I will find my wine writer here as soon as I get it all. And I'll just leave this on the counter to attract wild yeast. It's very pasty. It's not liquidy at all. I can turn it upside down. It's not coming out. So if yours looks like this, don't panic. That's exactly how it's supposed to look. So, and over the next 7 days, I will add more water and more flour, and eventually it'll turn into a moist sourdough starter, and we will post pictures after the video so you can see how the sourdough starter grows. So I will mark it today, and it's at about 1 cup. And I'd like to believe I would remember that, but chances are I won't, so I will mark it with a green pen. And I will clean off my... I always think I have everything ready when it comes to doing those videos, and then I get halfway into it and I realize I don't have all the tools I need. There we go. So if you have a super clean kitchen and it's not the middle of summer and you don't have all kinds of bugs flying around, you could probably leave it uncovered on your counter. I, however, cannot guarantee that in here, so I'm just going to stick a cloth over it. Some people recommend a dampened cloth. I'm just going to stick a clean, dry cloth over it. Just damp things. Yeah. And I will set it aside and feed it every day for the next 7 days. Thanks for joining us, and I'll keep you posted on how it turns out.